Thank you for joining me. My name is Derek. This is Addict MMA, and it's UFC Fight Night, Johnson versus Bader, which, as it turns out, is going to be probably a more exciting fight card than the UFC event we're supposed to look forward to a couple of weeks later, because Verdum Velasquez has been scrapped. Velasquez obviously calls out, then Verdum calls out. So now it's going to be left to us for free on Fox Sports 1, which I can't complain about, but that's another video. Breaking down this fight card. Starting off, we've got Sage Northcutt stepping up in weight class to the welterweight division against Brian Barberena. Really, the opponent for Sage makes no difference to me. He's a young kid. He's an athletic specimen. But let's put the six-pack aside. Let's not worry about how good he looks. Let's worry about what's real. And I believe the UFC has hand-fed him an opponent that he'll be able to defeat. However, in his last fight against Cody Pfister, we saw that Sage Northcutt on his back has, he's able to be controlled, is I think what I'm trying to say. Cody Pfister was controlling the fight, though you may call it boring. I didn't. I thought I was happy with what was going on. But there was an improper stand-up of the fight. Cody Pfister was controlling the ground game, and then they stood the fight up. Anyway, I mean, it just didn't take that long for them to stand it up. It was almost like they gave it to him. However, I digress. Northcutt is very explosive. Like Vitor Belfort, he's very explosive. The difference between Northcutt and Belfort is that, well, Northcutt is also explosive with his takedowns, which are phenomenal when he lands them. However, he can be taken down. He can be put on his back. We've already seen that. We won't really know about Sage Northcutt until we actually see him tested against a top-line opponent. Somebody in the top 10, maybe. Maybe top 15, but I'm going to say top 10. But, you know, the UFC's doing the right thing by Sage Northcutt. They're introducing him early on with easy fights. They're kind of getting him ready. So I understand what they're doing. You don't want to ruin a talent way before the talent has really found its peak. Sage Northcutt wins this fight. I don't know how. It could be by a TKO. It could be by a submission. I would imagine TKO. But Sage's going to win this fight. Moving on, actually, to what should be, and what I'm guessing to be, the fight we all need to pay attention to, which is Yuri Alcantara versus Jimmy Rivera. This is the fight that ultimately, if we all knew who they were in the sense that they were the top guys and they had big names, these are the two guys that rightfully should be on the main event. Because these two guys, at 135 pounds, they possess so much fight, so much skill, and there's a lot of history in each of their career that, not to take anything away from the other guys, Josh Barnett and Ben Rothwell, stuff like that. But this is the fight, in my opinion, that's going to be the fight that we all look back at that night and go, that was the fight. That was amazing. It's a tough one to call. It's almost identical records. We're talking about Alcantara, who's like 32-6, if I'm not mistaken, and then Rivera, who's 19, I don't know. I might be getting it wrong, but he's only got a loss. I'm going to give it to Rivera. It's tough to call. It could go either way, and I'll be satisfied with either direction that it goes in. However, I just feel like they're both dynamic in their striking ability. Alcantara has a capoeira background. However, when has that ever worked? It's fancy to throw for the cameras. When has it ever worked? However, Jimmy Rivera, his hooks, his combos, everything he does compared to Alcantara seems to me to be a bit more technical, a bit more usable. So I'm going to give it to Jimmy Rivera. We can call it a decision. I don't care. We can call it whatever you want. I'm giving it to Jimmy Rivera. Moving on, we've got Josh Barnett taking on Ben Rothwell. And ultimately, before we even get into the breakdown, I almost want Ben Rothwell to win just so we can see the creepy laugh. That whole supervillain thing he's kind of trying to pick up again. Dude, that was embarrassing. But it was fun to watch. You see how dumb I looked just then? I can't wait to see that again. So I'm pulling for Ben Rothwell only for that. However, he's taken on Josh Barnett, a former UFC heavyweight champion. I know, it was a long, long time ago. It was in the earlier days of MMA, the earlier days of UFC. It's catch wrestling versus regular striking versus striking versus mediocre ground game. It could go either way. It really could. Josh Barnett, to me, when I initially saw this fight matchup, I thought, cool, Josh Barnett's going to win. But then I thought about it for a second. I went, you know what? Josh Barnett's not the guy he was a few years ago. He's still great, but he's just not the guy. But then again, Ben Rothwell against a top-notch wrestler or a ground game artist, jiu-jitsu artist, not the best guy. So I initially want to give it to Josh Barnett. I'm going to give it to Ben Rothwell because I want to see the creepy laugh and supervillain shit again. So Ben Rothwell wins this fight because I said so. Moving on to the main event, we have Johnson and Bader. Ryan Bader takes on Anthony Johnson. It's so hard in a fight like this because Anthony Johnson's a guy who can hit you one goddamn time, and that's it. And I'm almost positive that he's going to land that shot against Ryan Bader. Right? Ryan Bader's not the best stand-up fighter. However, he showed us against Rashad Evans he can be. He used that jab. He worked that jab, that stiff jab. He did. He beat Rashad Evans in a technical striking match and then was able to get it to the ground when he needed to. But ultimately, he beat Rashad Evans with a jab. Man, I want to say Anthony Johnson's going to win this fight, but if Ryan Bader can utilize his wrestling skills, which he's got to. At this level of game, guys, you got to be thinking, what's the best thing to do to win? If Ryan Bader utilizes his wrestling against Anthony Johnson, then Anthony Johnson loses. Anthony Johnson is not a fighter on the ground. He's not a wrestler. He's not a jiu-jitsu practitioner. And if you saw what Cormier did to him, he looked like a goddamn baby who had just been beaten by his stepdad. He looked out of shape. He looked horrible after the first round. So, I'm going to pick Bader. Bader wins this fight because Bader needs to use his wrestling to win this fight. Not taking away from Johnson's power, but Bader needs to work the takedowns. Bader wins the fight. That's it. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Addict MMA. My name is Derek. Stay tuned for the credits. Twitter me, email me, do whatever you gotta do. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to the channel, and don't be a bitch. Leave your comments below. Thanks. See ya.